Classical Christian education aims to tailor a curriculum to the three stages of child development, namely grammar, logic or dialectic, and rhetoric. Today, let's look at the logic phase and what it aims to do or accomplish in a child. Previously, we looked at the grammar stage, where we talked about the main focus of that is to teach knowledge, to impart knowledge and facts to children through recitation and memory and repetition. And today we'll look at what is given or meted out or measured out to the child in the logic phase. And what is it? It's this. They learn in the logic phase what is good. You see, they've learned a bunch of facts. They've learned all these dates, histories, places, names, things, numbers, doctrine. So they learned all these different things about what is true. We've stuffed them full of facts and tried to develop their knowledge in all these different subjects. And at this point in time, children are, although they're curious in the grammar stage and we answer their questions and try to fuel their natural curiosity, it's at the grammar stage that children become argumentative, typically. It's at the logic phase, which is what we're talking about. It's at the logic phase where children become argumentative. Everybody has a sort of notion in their head of the stereotypical argumentative teenager. And the logic phase acknowledges that, acknowledges the natural drive of children at that stage of life to argue. So what do? We teach them how to argue. During the logic phase, we teach them how to argue or how to deduce or determine what is good. What is good? So please bear with me as I've got some notes down here. So in English, during the logic phase, we might teach something like, what is a correct expression? How do the elements of the subject, the verb, adverb, adjective, we've learned in the grammar stage where these things go and what they do. And now how can I use those things to say something that is good? So really we see English as the servant to the other fields or branches of knowledge. In geography, for example, during the logic phase, and I think you're hopefully going to start seeing how these things work. During the logic phase in geography, we might teach something like, how does the U.S. relate to Canada and Mexico? How does it relate to the world? What is good? How does this piece of knowledge fit in relationship to these other pieces of knowledge? See, we've given them this knowledge, hopefully in the grammar stage, and now during the logic phase, we're beginning to show the relationships between these different things. And you can do this some during the grammar stage, right? They're introduced maybe to some of these things, but it's during this point when children are naturally argumentative that we begin to teach them how the world and how the things in the world relate to one another. So, for example, during the grammar stage, we taught a child, what is sin? What is man? Who is God? And now, during the logic phase, we begin to show how those constituent components, those different pieces, relate one to another. How does God relate to us? We tackle questions like, were the Hebrew midwives justified when they lied to Pharaoh in Exodus? Was Rahab the harlot justified when she lied? We tackle questions like that where we relate, well, if God's law is this, and so did this, how does that relate? And so you can see the logic phase is really the synthesization of the knowledge that we've given to the children during the grammar stage. This corresponds, like I said, to the teenage years. Really, just to give you a general idea, it would correspond to something like the middle grades. Okay, so while they learn the elements of most branches and spheres and subjects, they learn the knowledge of subjects in the elementary grade. It's during this stage, the logic phase, where they learn to synthesize and relate them to each other and learn what is good. In history, what would this look like? Well, what was the outcome of such a battle? Was it good or was it bad? Moreover, where are you in this stream of history? As you can look at geography, right? In geography, you look at a map and see, here's where my state is. And in the logic phase, you might go, how do I relate to all these places around me? During the logic phase. In history, in the logic phase, you would look and say, okay, here's the stream of history. Here's where I am. How do I relate to all of that? How did that bring me to where I am? Just as a map gives me a place in the world, studying history and what blossoms in the logic phase in history is an understanding of this is where I am, not in space, but this is where I am in time, in the timeline of history. And they learn that in the logic phase in history. That should be the goal in the logic phase in history. The logic phase in logic is where we teach the syllogism or weighing propositions against each other. That would be reason in the logic phase. We teach them fallacies, and really, once again, we're hearkening back to we've stuffed them full of what is true, okay? And in the logic phase, we're taking all those things that are true and relating them together so that something is good. Because they can take a bunch of true things and relate them together in ways that they ought not and come out with something bad. So during the logic phase, we teach what is good, how does this relate to that, how do I process the information and sort it out. In other words, during the logic phase, we're incorporating and giving the child understanding. We give them knowledge in the grammar phase. In the logic phase, we teach them what is good. We try to develop their understanding. In math and things like that, we teach them fundamentally, if X, then Y. And that's what we teach in the logic phase. We try to answer the question, why, and take advantage of the natural development of a child, as their mind is well suited at this point in time to synthesize information and begin to relate it in a cohesive worldview. So hopefully that's helpful to you. We'll look next time at how this information is presented to others in the rhetoric phase, where they take the information that they've synthesized and then are required to defend and state it for the world. But we'll look at that during the rhetoric phase, hopefully in the next video. So I'll see you there. Have a good one.